Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is what, during the last video check-in 15 days ago, was referred to as my youngest, newest worm bin. Since then I've launched other systems, so it's no longer my youngest. And as the name or the naming or whatever would suggest, it's not been in service for all that long as of yet. I mean, 15 days ago when we last checked in, I believe the system was just about a month old, maybe just a hair over 1 month old. And now 15 days later, it's about a month and a half old. The exact age of the bin today is 47 days. Last time we found so much of this material out here on the top, perhaps because of that narrow piece of plastic that leaves a little bit of material a little bit dry on the edges. We just collected up that dry material around the edges to reuse it down in the feeding area as the foundation for the feeding, and I like the idea of doing that again. This also looks like something that might have been once used as a feeding zone indicator. I usually use coffee filters, and I got another coffee filter for them today. The feeding consists of a day's worth of coffee, banana peel, corn cob, and a bag of chickpeas. So I don't think we're gonna find much, if any, leftovers of the previous feeding. I did watch the video really quick, and I know there were things like cucumber peel dropped in here, some tomatoes, and the one thing that I kind of figured would go pretty quick were a few pieces of bread, which we soaked pretty thoroughly by spraying them down as we plopped them down into the feeding area. And bread, I guess, bread is usually one of those things that either gets eaten pretty quickly by the worms, or if it's not damp enough, I believe it just has its tendency to sit there and remain in the bin until all the mold starts to grow on it, and then the mold takes over and eats it. So moisture is pretty key to breaking down the bread, and I have a feeling we're not going to see any signs of that after 15 days. We've already seen one corn cob, but there was this one corn cob in here, which I think I'm actually starting to find a few remnants of. For whatever reason, when I first picked up this one, I could feel some good weight to it, and then I picked up the second one. There's going to be another one in here too, and I was able to feel that it was pretty heavy. But during the last check-in, we were kind of taken aback by one of the corn cobs. The last one I lifted up was so light, and then we couldn't resist cracking it open to see what the inside of it looked like. In my worm bins, for whatever reason, corn cobs really do seem to take a long time, but this one particular one must have been special. Must have just had that extra little flavor that the worms like, or something about it caused the worms just to go crazy on that one corn cob. So I have a funny feeling that what I just showed you there a moment ago is all that's left of it, after only a few feedings. I know it wasn't the last feeding, because the last feeding was when we stumbled on it and were surprised at how light it was when I held it. And then for that reason we even cracked it down the middle, opening it up, revealing this really interesting pattern that we can even still see some signs of over here. And then all those went back into the feeding area as leftovers when we added the bread and the cucumber bits and the tomato. So I'm wondering if maybe the trick to getting these corn cobs to break down is to simply crack it open down the middle. I mean, last time, I don't know, it's hard to say. These still almost feel heavier than what this third one felt like last week. Last week it almost felt like just like it was made of air. It was so light. But it is pretty amazing, because somehow to me corn cob always translates to slow composting food, but maybe not. I mean, in the past I'd even done things such as hacking a corn cob into little discs so that each piece would have more surface area, more opportunity to get broken down by the worms. And even in those cases, those little discs would just stick around forever. It's got to be the flavor of the food somehow. I don't know. I can't imagine what else it might have possibly been that caused that one corn cob to really get gobbled up so rapidly. Alright, I just kind of figured I would excavate a little bit further around the edges of around the feeding area, just in case there's just some other leftover bits of food floating around that we could check out. And there's the stem of a banana. I don't think we're going to find much more. Alright, let's get these guys fed. I'm kind of leaning towards doing the same thing as last check-in, which is just to take this material that we found out on the edges where things were a little bit dry due to not being covered with plastic, and get them down into service, since they've been kind of neglected by being allowed to dry out there. And you know, I didn't add any bedding last time, because that was what we did last time too, is we just sort of recycled bedding that we found out on the surface of the container. But I do have a number of additional coffee filters here, a whole bunch of them that have just been sort of sitting around for a while now and could use some composting. So I'm going to hang on to a couple just in case I need them. But here I have 4 coffee filters, which I thought we'd use as our bedding today. I mean, sometimes I'll take these things and sort of lay them into the feeding area, and maybe we could do a little bit of that here today too. Although some of the things we're going to be adding today won't really lend themselves to being inserted into little cups. I mean, that corn cob is just a big piece. Was just going to go into one of them. I can't really spread it out across multiple locations. Even that block of chickpeas is frozen so solid, I don't think that I can even break it. I tried yesterday to break it, but who knows, maybe since it's been out thawing for a short while now out of the freezer, maybe we'll have better luck trying to break it apart. So let's do away with that first, because this stuff is pretty stinky and I don't want to let it thaw out anymore, so that it would start stinking up my wormery here. If it would be possible to do away with this stuff as quickly as possible, get it down low into these little portion cups and then cover it up, that would be great. Except it's not really nope. Oop, not cooperating. So you know what? It goes in as a whole. And maybe a few of them could get popped into the neighboring container. But this I want to just kind of close over so it doesn't start stinking up a storm. And then let's not forget, we've got some leftovers here, so maybe one of the cups can even become the corn cup. Because then into that one we could place, alongside the old bits of corn, the nice new piece. Interesting. Now, what else did we have here? We had not a whole lot left. We've still got a banana peel here, which perhaps we could put a little chunk of it over there to go with the little little bits of chickpea, and the rest of it will go into a cup of its own over near me. So that is actually a pretty nice size feeding, but we're not even done yet, because we've still got the coffee, day's worth of coffee, and we'll hang on to this coffee filter. It'll become our new feeding zone indicator. How does that sound? And you know, we could also plop in some pulverized eggshell, which is the form of grit that I use when I feed my worm bins. And then a few other things I got here. It's not chunks of bread like last time, it's just bread crumb. It's just something that my mom found in her pantry, and I bought it home thinking that I'd be able to do away with it, gradually feeding it to the worm bins. And the last thing I think we're going to put in is just a little dusting of my worm chow too. That to me looks like a feeding that the worms are probably really going to appreciate. Now, have we forgotten anything? The feeding zone indicator could come back into play when we're done. We'll cover up the feeding zone, but I guess we'll do so in a way that allows us to sort of till around and examine the rest of the material in the bin. I did kind of get this sense when I first started digging in that perhaps the moisture was more in here than it needs to be. And it's been so humid lately, it's not too surprising. Things just do not have a tendency to dry. Like, I even washed a few buckets out yesterday, and I didn't really let them drain upside down. They still had a little bit of moisture down on the bottom, and they still have that moisture in them today. Many, many hours later. Surprising. So yeah, things don't dry. That means the worm bins can pretty much, I bet you I could leave this system uncovered and it would do all right, you know, because it's starting to accumulate worm castings pretty nicely everywhere. And possibly even enough of it to, you know, help the system retain its moisture level and not dry out too much. In the really, really brand new systems where it's almost all just, you know, shredded paper and cardboard, maybe some leaves, that stuff really is very airy and to me seems like stuff that could dry out pretty rapidly and thoroughly. But once the worm castings begin adding up, it does seem to me like the stuff does a pretty decent job protecting itself from drying out. The worm castings really do have a tendency to retain moisture within themselves. Some people even say that the stuff absorbs moisture from its surroundings. So I do worry sometimes when the older systems are high concentration of castings relative to everything else in the bin, and that they might get too damp over time. So I'm even questioning how to possibly replace the plastic covering that we found when we came in here. The moisture level is nice, but I wouldn't even really want to let it get any more than this. So instead of just placing it on the way we found it, I guess we do have the option to expose more of the top surface to airflow. So my idea was to make the plastic covering a little bit narrower, leaving more to dry air out on the sides. What's down the middle will tend to get pretty damp. The stuff that's near where the foods were will get pretty damp too, so perhaps these middle sections not so much, but we're going to leave some of this stuff exposed to the air. Perhaps at some point in the near future we'll just swap out the plastic covering for something like cardboard or paper, at least until the humidity of this summertime weather starts to die off. So I think that's pretty much all there is to do. I can start, yeah, I can already smell that stinky bag that the peas were in, so I got to get rid of that. And I got a few things that I got to get cleaned up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. That's all boring. Before I go though, really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.